I don't care what's going on in the flower park. Very good. There you go. We've already swapped out. I made a deal.
Good evening. I'd like to call the March 2020 General Services meeting to order. This time, are there any additions, corrections, deletions to the minutes? Hearing none. Do we have privilege of the floor? Going once, going twice. Hearing none, we'll get into our meeting. This time, we have a couple presentations tonight, and I would like to call Mike Borsey up to the podium so he can give us a little bit of background on the U.S. Census Bureau's presentation, please.
Okay. What I wanted to do before Stacy comes up and talk is just update the board on what the county has been doing in preparation for the census. While everyone knows that April 1st is Census Day, the county planning department has been working since 2018 on the census in preparation. There's different programs that we've been involved with. LUCA, which is a local update of census addresses, where we get the master address file from the census and we review it. We use real property data, building permit data to update and include new addresses for the census. There's a PSAP, which is Participant Statistical Area Program, where we look at census tracts and block groups, and the ones that the census has estimated that the population may be above their criteria or below their criteria, then we have to look at it and either possibly merge any of the tracts or block groups together, or if they're estimating a population above in certain areas, then we have to split these areas. There's a new construction program that we just finished up last month, I believe, where any of the new housing that has occurred, we give them information on them and at what point the construction is, if it's going to be habitable by April 1st or not. And there's also, there was a boundary verification program, which is just where we looked at the boundaries of all the municipalities to ensure that there's been no changes since the last census on that, so they can accurately place households in municipalities. So if it's in the town or the village, if they're on the boundary. The most recent program is actually not through the census, but through New York State, which we had the resolution last week about the New York State Census outreach grant. I haven't heard anything on if we received the award yet. Scott hasn't heard anything yet either. I just checked with him on that. So any day now, we're hoping to get the information on that. And this is new. This is the fourth time I've done the census working for the county. This is the first time that I'm aware of that New York State provided funding to counties to do outreach for marketing and advertising of the census. In general, the U.S. data is required to be submitted to the President by December 31st of this year, and that's the U.S. population. Then by the end of March 2020 or 2021, the state data starts coming out, and then after that they'll roll out county populations in the towns and the villages and census designated places after that. And then that's when this body will start getting involved, because we'll have to start reviewing the current county legislative districts to see if there's any changes that need to be made to those boundaries, depending on any population shifts that may have occurred. Because there is I don't know off the top of my head, but there is the criteria for the population number by district have to be within a certain range. So if one goes too high, then we have to look at moving the boundaries. So that's it. I know Phil likes really short presentations, so I wanted to do mine as short as possible. We do have Stacy Albro, who's a partner specialist with the U.S. Census Bureau, and I asked her to come just to, give her presentation on the census so you can be aware of how the census will be run this time. Okay. It's not projecting. You don't know either? Uh-oh. It's on. F7? Everyone's throwing out F numbers here. No. That's what I'm trying to... Yep. No. It should be right here. Oh, there we go. Touchscreen. I think it's duplicated. Oh, F8 brought up the menu, but... Yep.
So that's where you're exporting video from? From here?
That must be. Or that's...
Yeah, I don't know how it's set.
Or it's just wireless.
Yeah, it's on, you got it plugged into a,
Not me. Tori did it.
it's not,
Yeah, well-
wait a minute, right here. Where's the, we have a plug. Yeah, I need a VGA cable. It's not plugged in. The laptop doesn't have an HDMI port. No, it does in the back. Yeah. Over here. Where's the HDMI port? Okay. Yeah, do it.
There we go.
Yeah. I will. I remember you. Yeah. Yeah. He's something else. Oh, right. Yeah, exactly. Definitely. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. I'm glad we finally got the presentation up. It definitely isn't the same without the presentation. My name is Stacey Albro. I'm a partnership specialist for Jefferson and Lewis counties, and I work a little bit in St. Lawrence County as well. But this area is my focus area. So the 2020 census is here. It is here. Within a couple days, everyone will start to receive those invitations in the mail, and I'll get to that in just a second. So the U.S. Census Bureau is the largest statistical agency in the U.S. Aside from the 2020 census, which is a big deal, they actually do 130 other censuses and surveys throughout the year, so they are quite busy. And there's a list up there. I'm sure many of you already know all the surveys that they conduct, but there's a few up there. Survey awareness, as Mike was already mentioning, we finished up address canvassing this summer. That address canvassers were going around to every household, every residence, just ensuring that the residence is occupied. Was it a seasonal home? Was it previously a single-family home and now it's a duplex? Just some of the unique situations that occur. So the 2020 census. The goal of the 2020 census is to count everyone once, only once, and in the right place. There are many challenges facing the upcoming census. We are going to be counting an estimated 300 million people in over 140 million housing units. The census is mandated by Article 1, Section 2 of the U.S. Constitution. It is conducted every 10 years, ending in 0, and has been since 1790. The 2020 census, decennial census, is all about representation and funding. It is important. It determines the number of seats in the House of Representatives, which I'm sure everyone here already knows. It defines congressional and state legislative districts, school districts, and voting precincts. And one of the most important things for people in the community is that third bullet. It determines the allocation of over $675 billion in federal funding. And I'm sure everybody knows some of the examples are up there. Head Start, our after-school programs, free lunch programs, SNAP, Medicaid, the list goes on. So very important. Also provides insight to governments, businesses, and community planning groups for planning purposes. So the third most important part of the census is that it's safe. The information that is gathered is used for statistical data only. Any personally identifiable information, as soon as the Census Bureau receives it, it is isolated and separated from that statistical data. So the statistics that are generated from the information that is collected is never stored with people's personally identifiable information. The Census Bureau employees, like myself, all take an oath to protect confidential information for life. A violation of that is A violation is subject to 5 years in prison or up to $250,000 or both. So very important that we protect personally identifiable information. Private information is never published. It is never shared with any law enforcement agencies or courts. That is very important to a lot of people in the community. They want to ensure that their concerns is that they may have an extra person living in their residence that is unauthorized, they're not supposed to have. So they're concerned about sharing that information on the census. So we want to ensure that they know that that information is private, it is confidential. Cybersecurity, our cybersecurity systems that we have placed are some of the most stringent in the nation. And like I said before, when the information is collected, it is separated within our databases so that personally identifiable information is never stored with that statistical data. So when we collect information, it's never tied to a person, an individual. And then the third part is that it's easy. This year will be the first year that the census can be completed online, the 2020, the decennial census. There's been censuses completed in the past, the housing survey, which there was an option to complete it online, but this will be the first year that the decennial census can be completed online. So when you receive that invitation in the mail, there'll be a code on your invitation. You can go online and upload that code. The code is tied to your residence, so the system will already know what residence you are completing your survey for. You can complete it via phone, or you can do the paper survey. And if you opt to do none of those, then you will be visited by a census employee. The information that is asked is name, age, date of birth, race and origin, Hispanic origin, relationship, gender, tenure, operational questions such as population count, name, phone number, over count, under count. And what that means is the reason we collect name and date of birth is so that we make sure that we're not duplicate counting. So that is the only personally identifiable information that we do collect. And like I said, that's just to ensure that no one is being counted more than once. Things we never ask for: Social Security number, money or donations, anything on behalf of a political party, and nothing to do with credit card numbers or bank account information. I know there's been concerns recently. People have told me that they already did their survey. They got it in the mail and they already completed it. But they were concerned because at the end it asked for a donation to a specific political party. I told them, no, that is definitely not the census. So it's definitely important that we ensure we educate the public so they know the difference. This is just a brief overview of the languages that we have available, language support we have available. It's going to be printed in both English and Spanish. There's direct language support available in 12 languages, and then there's additional language support in 59 other languages. So if a person does not speak English and they need a specific language support, if they call the Census Bureau, they will be connected directly to a person who speaks that language. So how the 2020 census will invite everyone to respond. Like I said, everyone who has an address where they receive mail will get an invitation in the mail. That starts this Thursday. Those invitations will be mailed out between the 12th and the 20th. I think I need my reading glasses, or my glasses on. It's hard to see from here, but mid-March towards the end of the March, if you haven't completed your survey, you will get a reminder letter in the mail. If you still haven't completed it by the end of March, beginning of April, you'll get a postcard reminder in the mail. Beginning of April to mid-April, a reminder letter and paper questionnaire will be mailed out at that time. And then towards the end of April, if you still haven't responded, that's when the enumerators will start docking. So the census is safe, it's easy, and it's important. The ways that we're asking the trusted voices in the community to help us is by sharing the message that it is safe, easy, and important. We're not so much promoting the jobs anymore. There are still a couple more waves of jobs that are going to occur. but for the most part, Jefferson County has done an outstanding job in recruiting and filling those positions. So we are looking like we are going to have enough enumerators to be able to fulfill the mission. Yeah, very important. So I won't go into the jobs too much. Again, April 1st is Census Day. Questions sometimes are generated regarding when and how to count certain people. A lot of folks that live in upstate New York are snowbirds. They spend some of their time down south, so they ask, where am I supposed to be counted? Do I get counted down where I reside in Florida during the winter, or do I get counted up here? The answer to that question is where they spend the most amount of their time. Let's say they spend 6 months here and 6 months down there, then on April 1st, wherever they are on April 1st, that's where they should be counted. Complete Count Committee, I won't go into it too much, but we have a definitely robust and energetic Complete Count Committee for Watertown and Jefferson County, and they've been doing a phenomenal job. So we're in the motivation phase right now, March to May. Reminder phase, May to July, and then thank you phase starts in July. So this is just a brief overview of how we ask our partners to support us and promote the 2020 census. We have materials, posters, flyers. We ask to do presentations like this right here with different organizations just to help message the census. So this is a screenshot of Rome. Rome is the Response Outreach Area Mapper. For those of you not familiar with it, if you go on Rome, you can actually zoom into Jefferson County, and then you're going to see different shapes. Those are all the census tracts. You can't really tell on this slide, but they range from a light green to a darker blue. The darker the shade of blue represents the hard-to-count census tracts, the hard-to-count areas. Those two you see in the middle are the two census tracts on Fort Drum. Fort Drum is projected to be the hardest-to-count area in all of Jefferson County. And they are projected to have an over 30% low response rate. So we've been working very hard with Fort Drum to help promote the 2020 census and try to ensure a complete count of the entire installation. So if you click on those census tracts, it will open up a little window which gives you a breakdown of all the demographics within that census tract. Data dissemination program, I won't go into this too much. A lot of you are already aware of the tools that are available via the census website. Want me to play the video? Quick? No? Okay. This is just our social media platform. And then our contact information for the partnership program, mostly in data dissemination program, if you're interested. Do I have any questions?
You talked about Fort Drum being hard to count. So with the census, what constitutes a permanent citizen versus a transient citizen? Was it on the slide? Did I miss something, or does it? So what's the criteria for that?
We do not care about citizenship. We don't even ask that question.
I meant not citizen.
Resident?
Resident.
Okay, great question. So the folks that we're counting, as far as like Jefferson County, or do you mean nationwide?
What's the standard? So maybe people in Fort Drum don't think that they're a resident here.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and so we are trying to emphasize that Fort Drum is part of Jefferson County. So the soldiers that are residing here on the installation should be counted here as part of Jefferson County. And those numbers definitely, they're important because they affect all of Jefferson County.
They're extremely important for us as a
yes, absolutely.
governing body.
So the only soldiers who would not be counted as part of Jefferson County potentially could be the ones that are deployed. So there's kind of some different scenarios there as far as what type of deployment they're on and how they'd be counted in that regard.
So, and that leads me to the snowbird question. So if you're, is it 6 months in one place, or is it, how do you not get double counted?
So you should be counted wherever you spend the most amount of time. The 6-month rule, just an example, if you're not sure because you spent equal amounts of time in 2 different places, then you would go by that 1 April census day. Where are you on 1 April?
So that locator communication that you send to somebody's house, how do they factor where to send it? Do they just the last place you were a resident? Or?
So every resident that's been verified to actually be a full-time resident,
Okay.
those are the types of residents that will receive that invitation in the mail. So vacation homes probably will not receive any type of mail at those types of residences. If they do, then the census actually, the survey actually kind of spells out how to count oneself.
So is there any, Fort Drum that we definitely don't want that population underestimated. So how can we help you as the Census Bureau with Fort Drum? Because those numbers are very important to our community.
Absolutely. I've been working with some of the leaders on Fort Drum, so I think the best approach and way to help message the importance of the census in County Fort Drum is the leadership, the key leaders on Fort Drum, engaging them, because that's kind of how I'm retired military. That's kind of how the military works. It starts from the top, and once I've received, my commander tells me I will do this, I will do it. It's kind of hard as a partnership specialist. It's been challenging trying to go in Fort Drum and work with some of the organizations on Fort Drum, like the MWR and the ACS, because they're all like, oh, wait a minute, I haven't been told I'm supposed to do this. So they wait for the message to come from their leadership. So really that's where it had to start. So definitely I've been working it, but if Jefferson County leadership comes in and engages the Fort Drum leadership and says, hey, we need everybody, we need a complete count of Fort Drum, that's definitely going to be a motivation to make it happen.
John?
How many enumerators are you going to be having for this county?
Approximately 1,100. Some of the hard-to-count populations that we have been trying to target, military, veterans, children 5 and under were the hardest to count population in the 2010 census. So we've been trying to promote counting children, especially. There's different reasons why they were missed, but it's important that we count them because a lot of that federal funding goes towards schools and educational programs, Head Start, so on. So we want to make sure that children are counted. Infants, if they are born as of 1 April, should be counted. Other hard-to-count populations, LGBT in our community, and folks who are experiencing poverty and homelessness are also a hard-to-count population. So those are some of the target populations that we're trying to do outreach to ensure they are counted. All right, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, just real quick. I mean, we have a lot of large farms in the area that also use migrant or immigrant populations. Are you going to be visiting them also? Because I presume they will probably not necessarily voluntarily.
Yes, definitely. And we do count them as well. It is a challenge because, of course, they're fearful of that information being shared with courts, law enforcement agencies, but we definitely want to count them as well. I've been working with different organizations like the Cornell Cooperative Extension, different organizations that work with farmers. Yep, the Farm Bureau as well, yep. All right. Thank you. It is, yes, that's correct. And the reason for that is because we can safeguard information better if it is done through the online procedure, rather than filling out a paper survey and that paper survey going through the mail and being received by someone who has to then input it manually into the system. So we prefer everybody do it online. Good question. So it's going to depend on the household. For households that have typically 2 to 3 people in them, it's about 10 to 15 minutes to complete it. Yeah, thank you. Any other questions?
Any other questions? Thank you,
Thank you.
Stacy. Okay, next we have the Development Director for Volunteer Transportation Center, Jennifer Hodge. She's going to give us a presentation on the transit study report on expansion of city bus transportation program. Jennifer? Yeah, do you have enough room there?
Yeah, plenty. I was more concerned that you see me on the microphone.
We can. We got you.
Thank you. I also have with me Frank Zoldo, who is our Regional Mobility Manager, Director, and Sam Purrington, our Executive Director. And they'll both jump in as we move along, and Don, you jump in as well. I can play it if you want to. They seem very comfy.
Nope.
Everywhere. It doesn't matter.
No, if you do. Yeah.
I have it here. Is there another?
For anybody who may not know it, John serves as the chairman of the MPO, Metropolitan Planning Organization, who's been actively involved with this transit initiative to go beyond the current city boundaries into other areas on a very organized basis, which we'll find out about. But a quick reference to John. John actually is very actively involved in this.
Thank you, Mr. Hagman. I also point out we also have Scott Docture and Barb, what's that? Cadwell, thank you. Who is on-site or local staff for New York State DOT who also work with the MPO. Scott's one of the board members and the executive. You got a title for that, right? Director for the Watertown Jefferson County Transportation Council. Yep. And you know, we're talking about census tracts, and you know, the MPO came out of the last census, and so a lot of funding, you know, we can attest to that, you know, the value of the census, and that we've been seeing a lot of road bridge construction project monies, but also transportation monies coming into the area, some flexibility and abilities to do studies, and it's all within the metropolitan corridor, which runs from Carthage, West Carthage, through the center of the county to Dexter. So, a little bit about the MPO. It's a very interesting, dynamic council, and doing a lot of interesting things. So, I guess at this point, I guess Jennifer's ready.
Thanks. It doesn't dawn on it at all. So, we were asked to be here tonight just to kind of give you an update on what's been going on in terms of transit in and around our area. You know, there are many players in the game. There's lots of funding sources. It's almost like the military. There's an acronym for everything. So we'll try to break it down just a little bit, give you a brief overview, and then answer any questions you might have. But through the whole presentation, I hope the piece that you take away from this is that as a community, we're looking to provide transit services that are going to assist the folks in the city and rural Jefferson County with gaining access to education and employment, which just benefits everybody. So the city is part of this because they've been the only folks providing any kind of public transit for many years. They know the transit system operation inside and out, and they're also part of the MPO that John spoke about. The county's at the table because, you know, we've heard from many people throughout the area, through the people that we serve at the Volunteer Transportation Center, folks in the rural area need access to that employment and education. So everyone from the county is invested in this. The MPO sets the policy because of our last census and because we bumped up to that metropolitan area. They kind of oversee anything that happens with a certain amount of the funding that we have in this area. And NYSDOT, of course, New York State Department of Transportation, provides the guidance that we need to bring it all together. So what's been going on? Kind of as part of our mission at the VTC, recognizing that we do need further transit options in the area, we pulled together a Jefferson County Transit Task Force. Meets on a monthly basis, and we talk about all things transit. Folks that come to that are our friends from the city and the county and the state, any non-for-profit that serves the constituents in the area. And they come to us, we talk about, what is needed for transit? Is there somebody at the table that can help fill that gap? Or is it something that we need to put into the Jefferson County Coordinated Plan? That's a plan that is required by the state, and it must be updated every 4 years. So we've just, as this ad hoc group, been pulling that information together. It then comes to John and you folks for approval, and that's what we use to build any of the transit system in the rural area moving forward. So it talks about, it's almost like a SWOT analysis. So what are we doing good? What do we need to do? Where are the gaps? That kind of thing. As you may have heard, MPO commissioned a transit study. Very elaborate, lengthy process, but gave us some really good information. Talked to folks in and around Jefferson County. What do you need? Where do you need people to go? Where's the employment? Where's the education? And then suggested a footprint for how we could make that happen as a community. So that's just been finalized. So we also have that as a guideline for public transit in our area. And then for the last 2 years, the city has contracted with us at VTC to recoup some of the funds. So as we move from a rural to a metropolitan area, the focus changed, and where we got money for public transit changed. And so we've been able to, over the last couple of years, draw down quite a bit of money, and that's how you see new buses on the road. So it's able to pay for that. It's helped make their operation whole by bringing in some operational dollars for them. And this year, we're going to keep moving with that, get some of those lapsing funds taken care of, and so we'll be on a real-time basis. We'll be drawing down from year to year. So this year, we'll finish that up. Next year, we'll be drawing down. 2019 will be current, as we're, the applications I've been doing over the last couple of years have been 2013 and forward. So that's very important to the operation as we've helped stabilize that. And then as you saw in the newspaper last week, or heard on the radio, we've been contracted or been awarded to take on mobility management for the city and greater MPO area. So what does that mean? It means that we now have one person in that city area out to the MPO bounded area that will actually focus on transit all of the time. Similar to what Frank does in St. Lawrence County, they will take these studies and these coordinated plans, and they will make all that stuff come to fruition, which again just helps the community that we live in. So there's a triennial review. There's some operational things that the mobility manager will work with. There's also opportunities to extend that beyond the MPO bounded area and have the county have someone also appointed to taking care of those transit-related pieces and help move forward on the multi-phase project that was identified in the MPO study. And we can, if the group decides that they want to go for a countywide transit plan or program, then this mobility manager would be there to help that as well. One of the pieces that I think is important is to understand that there are dollars out there. 5307, 5339, again, all acronyms, but there are funds from the federal level that are available and can help fund these things, and that's how the city is going to fund their portion of the mobility manager. The other half of that would be a 5311 grant, which also can help fund that side, the rural side of a mobility manager. And we just went through an exercise the last couple of weeks to move towards having the county abdicate their rights to applying for those funds to the city so that we can access those funds to, again, potentially move the whole transit process forward, looking at, is it a county system that we need? Maybe it's not. Frank mentioned today van pooling. There's all sorts of things out there, but if you don't have anybody kind of, driving the car, then you're not able to move forward. So there's different funding streams that are out there and are available, and that we will hopefully be able to access as time goes on. We've had some very successful programs in our area, and Frank's going to come and talk to you a little bit about St. Lawrence County and what he's been able to do there, as well as in Oswego County.
Hello, everyone. So I guess before I talk about the successes of St. Lawrence County, I first would like to see a show of hands of who has ever ridden a public transit bus or needed public transit to get from one location to another. Ridden it? Okay? Ever in your whole life? All right. Good. So that's good. That's good to hear, because what we realized in St. Lawrence County is that lots of people needed access. So I'm going to give you some stats and figures, but after you hear all those stats and figures, what I want you to realize is the only reason why St. Lawrence County is successful is because everybody took down their silos, their barriers, and worked for one common purpose, and that purpose was to give people access. One program I'm going to tell you about is the First Mile, Last Mile program. In a nutshell, it brings a person from the bus stop, from their house to the bus stop. Keep in mind that St. Lawrence County is the biggest county in New York State and probably one of the most rural. So I don't want you to take first mile, last mile literally as 1 mile, because the statistics show that the average trip for first mile, last mile to get people to the bus stop was 27 miles. So also keep in mind, we started this program in 2018 just using human service agencies and working with their clients, the people they serve, just to get all the bugs and kinks worked out. We did 845 trips. A trip is defined as a one-way trip from point A to point B. In 2019, we've done 4,800 trips alone in 2019. But more importantly in that statistic is 66% of the people that use this program used it for employment. 15% of the people that use this program used it for education. So what this program did is people that have transportation as a barrier, it's getting them the ability to work, it's getting the ability to go to BOCES, to go to higher education. The other benefit in St. Lawrence County is we have 3 out of the 4 colleges that drop down their silos and sign contracts with public transit to subsidize routes to get their students to grocery shopping, internships, employment. By opening it up to the public, now people can get access in the county from Canton to Potsdam 7 days a week, where we didn't have that option. So by their investment in the public transit, now we got more people getting access. We're also doing things like working with the Office of the Aging to get seniors to fresh fruits and vegetables and to social activities. I'll tell you an anecdotal story. We started an intra-village shuttle in the city of Augsburg. And we started off that first month less than 100 rides per month. We're up to 450 rides per month now. But the one story that meant the most to me was we had 4 seniors from the high-rise that would get on the bus every day, ask the bus driver to play country music, and then there was a segment where the DJ would do trivia question. Those 4 seniors never got off the bus. They rode it around and round and socialized and listened to music and answered trivia questions because it gave them a better quality of life. It gave them the opportunity to socialize. So that's an anecdotal story there on what we're doing in St. Lawrence County. The other thing to let you know in St. Lawrence County, if you haven't read it in the governor's report, we wrote a grant, and it was just announced we got $1.5 million for the county. What that means is 10 free buses, no local match, 100% covered by the state to help public transit in St. Lawrence County. These are the kinds of things that a mobility manager is able to do at no local match to the county. The county provides no local match for their public transit or for mobility management, and we're able to get these kinds of results. So I would welcome you guys to ask questions of Jen and I, to think about countywide transportation and the options out there, because we're rural and we have 75,000 rides a year. In 2017, we were at 50,000. So people need transportation. We don't realize it sometimes with the lives that we have, but they really need it. And I could tell you in Jefferson County, Alex Bay, Oxbow, Dexter, Brownsville, Sackett, people need transportation because people want to work. They just don't have that transportation barrier to get from point A to point B to get on their feet. The other thing to let you know is St. Lawrence County, a mobility manager assessed what it was costing the third-party vendor to operate, realized it wasn't a big loss, made it efficient and sustainable in year one. Oswego County right now, we've been there 4 weeks, working with your counterparts there in the planning office, and they got a dynamic office administrator called Deanna. We've been able to get the county reimbursed $250,000 that's been due to them since 2013. So I'll leave you with this. Think about the people's lives that you're going to impact. Think about how employment, people's quality of life are going to get improved by having people solely focused on breaking down those barriers and giving people access. Then I guess we'll open it up to questions, Jen and I.
Any questions for Jennifer or Frank? Mr. Hagman?
Do a little bit of a kind of a summary for a second. What's going on is that the MPO has worked through a major study, and there's going to be a series of steps in theory that takes place, but we need to have somebody to do all that research, see if it makes sense to do the kind of things what Frank is talking about, which probably does, but somebody needs to put all that together, so a mobility manager can do that. However, at the present time, it is the city of Watertown that runs the public transit system. Before we established an MPO, everything was on a rural basis, so by definition, the city could only run their transit system within the boundaries of the city. Now that there's an MPO that has redefined the metropolitan urban center for Jefferson County, it extends somewhat westerly to the airport. I don't know if it really goes to Sackett, but it goes easterly towards Fort Drum. I mean, it's kind of a narrow band. It's not a circular thing. But what that allows for is the city to expand their program. And by expanding their program, again, there's going to be a series of steps. One of them is to link up with Fort Drum initially, to get into the city, also going out Arsenal to BOCES and to perhaps the industrial park. We already know through the IDA that there is a need to reach out to Clayton. We know that there's a need to go to the Bay. We know that there's a need to go down towards South Jeff. But again, we have to prove that, and it's over a period of time. And the we, by definition, will likely be this mobility manager. What doesn't make sense, though, is to have separate but equal, so to have the county with a program and the city with a program. The city, through the bus transit systems, in essence, are the experts. They've been doing it forever, and they have the equipment. They have all those supplies. Potentially, as Frank has indicated, and Jen as well, there are grants out there that we could purchase more equipment to now start to expand in other directions under some sort of defined process. This is the infancy stage of starting to move in that direction, and so what we've done when we acquiescing, so to speak, what we're doing is simply saying, city, we want you to apply, essentially on our behalf, to cover the rural piece that still is beyond the MPO area, and work with your now mobility manager. So there might be a second mobility manager, or it may be more along the lines of staffing through the VTC, however that gets assigned. Yet to be determined. The grant application that they have just submitted on our behalf, if you will, probably, and Jen, I think, indicated that, won't really be available for about a year. So the city's going to jumpstart their initiative with the VTC as going to Fort Drum and a little bit further west. We'll come along a little bit, when I say we, it's kind of a collective we, through the MPO a little bit. We'll come along a little bit later on and then do the assessment in time. Ultimately, there will be decisions to be made, and that will be, do we join forces with the city at some point? Do we allow the city, not allow, it's the wrong term. Do we encourage, do we want the city to go county-wide, expand their program? Is there some model in between? Again, the mobility manager will help us come to those conclusions, and then we'll make a good business decision 2, 3, 4 years down the road. But this is the first critical step. So on behalf of the county, I'm sending a letter to the city saying thank you very much. We appreciate that effort, and let's hope that we secure that money. But again, it'll be a year down the road. There's no cost to the county at the present time. We will decide down the road what our role is. But in the meantime, it allows a program to evolve in a much broader base, as is the case with St. Lawrence County, and I guess Oswego County now, and Lewis County. And from that, we'll build the block. But the first step is what we're doing right now. We wanted everybody to be aware of what's taking place around us, but also what it is that we're doing to encourage something going forward. One person that was promoting this thing 4, 5, 6 years ago or something along that line, Sam, do you have any thoughts? I mean, we're starting to see a little bit of that vision that you identified with the MPO a couple years ago. Again, it doesn't happen overnight, but it is definitely moving in the right direction. So, John, anything else you might want to add?
No, it's pretty much a very good summation of it. So it's a matter of we're kind of the missing link in the chain that's been forming around us at this point with the work that they've been doing in St. Lawrence County and Lewis County. You know, they've been doing it through their own planning department in Lewis County. So I think the biggest takeaway is certainly allowing the city to be the central point and the central focus through their transportation office to have one mobility manager. I mean, that's the important component is just to keep things streamlined and keep it focused there. We're not the professionals in this. We're becoming very good professionals in the airport, and I don't think that we're going to get into transportation. But the funding is there, the funding is available, and it seems to be very vigorous funding. It's kind of interesting and unique how much comes from the federal government to accomplish this. And so I think that's where I want to kind of reassure maybe some of the questions that other board members have, that how much do we get onto the hook for at some point. And even at this point, St. Lawrence County hasn't even put in a single dime, if I'm correct, towards their transportation efforts. So, you know, they've done a tremendous amount of work without costing the local taxpayer thus far.
Not only has it not cost them money, they also get an administrative fee for administrating the grant. In St. Lawrence County, it's $75,000 for year 1, $80,000 for year 2.
So with the mobility manager in place, he'll be able to, or she will be able to create the business plan, do the marketing, the advertising, determining what the routes will be, you know, to maximize the resources here. This is not going to be wasted time and wasted energy. It's either going to work or it's not. So I would certainly not advocate for something that was not going to be good and profitable for our community. So but I look forward to the questions on the matter.
Jeremiah?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Did you say there are 75,000 rides in St. Lawrence County?
So the administrative fee that St. Lawrence County...
No, the rides. Number of riders?
75,000 rides.
Rides.
So rides...
Point A to point B?
Point A to point B, 75,000 of those.
How many days a week does the bus ride?
5 days a week for most of the routes. We have the 3 college routes. SUNY Potsdam, Clarkson University, and SUNY Canton that run 7 days a week. Yeah, it's
And how many
75
total routes do you have?
19.
19 routes. Okay. I'm just trying to, if they're 52 weeks a year and 5 days a week, it's 260 days of riding. 75,000 people, or rides, excuse me, divided by 260 means there are 288 rides per day. Since very few people are going one way, you're talking about 144 people who are taking rides over 19 routes is 7.6 people per route per day. I understand that the money's coming from the federal government, but $1.5 million so that we can bus 7 to 8 people per day per route just seems like not the sort of thing that I want to get involved in Jefferson
Okay,
County.
so let me just try to understand your question first.
The total number of people
So
riding.
where are you getting the $1.5 million?
Well, you say you got a $1.5 million grant from the federal government to buy
Right.
10 new buses.
Correct, that's 100% state approved.
Sure.
So the reason why, one of the other pieces to St. Lawrence County is shared services. So the ARC is a third-party provider that when this whole public transit changed over from Rothels to the ARC, now you've got shared services, which is saving money for the position. The other piece is that in order for a bus to be efficient and sustainable, the minimum number of riders is 8 riders on a bus. I'm going to trust your math is
Sure.
correct, but I can tell you right now that SUNY Potsdam alone is doing 2,100 riders a month,
I believe that.
okay? You got to also remember that our county is very rural. And I guess the other thing to think about is if we're doing 7.6 riders per month, what I'd like you to think about, and 66% of the people riding the bus are getting employed, how is that saving? Isn't there a savings there to county with getting people employed and spending money in the county? And I can tell you right now that New York State DOT states that St. Lawrence County, based on the statewide system, is running very efficient and very
Sure.
sustainable.
No, I believe you do. I don't mean to, I don't want it to sound like a criticism of you. I think
No,
you're doing a great,
I'm not taking
it sounds
it as-
like you're doing a great job.
No,
I looked at,
take me out of the picture.
absolutely,
But I want you to look at the financial benefit that it has to the county
sure.
by
I
getting
looked at-
people employed.
I looked at the numbers that were reported last year out of just the city of Watertown.
It's like 120,000.
120,000,
Yeah.
which is about 171 people going from point A to point B and then point B to point A.
Correct.
And they spent $810,000 in their budget to bus 171 people for 0.6% of the population. I look at public transportation as numbers. I understand that there are people, I understand that there are senior citizens who like to ride and answer trivia questions. I don't mean to disparage them, but I look at the tax dollars and I look at the taxpayers. Because I'm a local taxpayer, I'm a state taxpayer, I'm a federal taxpayer. And when I hear, oh, it's all covered by a grant, well, it's tax dollars at work.
Okay,
It just might not be local.
All right, my boss wants to pipe in here, so let me get Sam.
Welcome in, Sam.
So that is a great question, extremely fair question, and should absolutely be something that the mobility manager has to answer, because not every bus should be driven out there. The thing that drives me nuts, because I have volunteer drivers that are the cheapest thing going. If I see buses driving around empty, it drives me crazy. One of the reasons why we're in Oswego is my wife got her master's down there, and I would spend a lot of time with my kids just hanging out in Oswego, and I saw buses riding empty all over the place. And as a transportation guy, it drove me crazy. Your point is absolutely correct. Some of the math that Frank gave you on the 19 routes, those aren't fully public routes. So, but your point is clear. What a mobility manager does is it's going to look at each one of the routes as defined in the study, figure out, is this real? Will we have the ridership? Because we don't want to spend that amount of money to support a few folks. We can do that cheaper with volunteer drivers, other options. Buses are not always the option. But where we have a lot of people going someplace, like I'm sure from Watertown to Clayton in the summer for the Harbor Hotel, they will be full buses because they have a need. If that need changes, then that need goes away. So your point is absolutely spot on. Just don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Oh, sure. I also know that, I think it was President Reagan who said there's nothing quite so permanent as a temporary government program. So as soon as we got the buses, we got the grant for it, we got to do it. So I don't know that I've ever seen one of our temporary programs ever go away.
Well, we actually cut one of the routes in St. Lawrence out of Star Lake because it was not getting the ridership. It was not a very popular thing. Wasn't at all. But there was no ridership to substantiate a bus. So, we all pay taxes. We cannot do that. So I think your point is extremely fair. And there's no way that anybody in transportation will not just drive buses around for the sake of driving it. So. Yep, we have volunteer drivers across the 3-county area, about 350 of them. Seasonally, it goes down. It's going to come back up. They use their own gas. We reimburse them for their gas money because if I ask you to drive me to the airport, you'd probably do it. But if I asked you to do it 5 days a week, you'd say, hey, man, this is getting expensive on my car. Yeah. So, yeah, we have 350 of them throughout the Tri-County area, and most of them are retired and just, they don't know what to do, but they want to help somebody, so this is a great way to do it. Yeah. Pete Turner, our newest volunteer driver in the Carthage area, so he's a lot cheaper than what they paid him. You got it. Correct. No. Well, another almost 5,000 trips that are funded by public transit. We do our own fundraising and do our own contracts with insurance companies. We have 166,000 trips a year with volunteer drivers, but that's all separate. Part of the funding comes from the county. You guys give us, an authorized agency, chili cook-offs. We raise about $400,000 a year, but most of our work is through insurance companies. We do a lot of work for, Blue Cross Blue Shield, through Medicaid, through United Healthcare, Fidelis, so on and so forth, like a doctor's office. You go to a doctor's office, some people can't pay. They get free rides. That's what we provide. Other people have insurance. We bill insurance using volunteer drivers. But as we work on those rides and helping people, we continually saw people that wanted rides to work and to education and other things that we just couldn't do because all we do is medical appointments. And through that, we, 10 years ago said, you know what, this is in rural Jefferson County. We look around the state, they have bus systems. We don't, and that's what the buses really accomplish, is people's access to education and to employment, as long as the ridership is there. Because you don't want to have what's going on certain days in Oswego where that bus is running empty through town. And Oswego's should have riders, but they didn't when I was there. And that's part of the reason why we're down there, is to try to figure out what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. I think that the 19 routes, I think, is the total number of routes that receive funding but are not the ones that are completely public transportation. Because when Frank started talking about shared services, anytime you have a bus system, we're talking about this city's got a bus system. In St. Lawrence County, the ARC, which is JRC, operate the whole bus system for themselves and for public transit. And the shared rides together helps make the system very cheap. So the 19 routes are the total routes that are out there that are receive funding but are not completely public transportation routes altogether. I think that number is more like 5. So if you divide by 5, your number changes. 5 that are shared? Yeah. And if we have a route like the one in Star Lake that doesn't have riders, we cancel it. And then we work with, using volunteer drivers or a van pool or something. There's lots of different options, and I think you're going to see crazy options coming out over the next 10 years with autonomous vehicles and things like that, which I didn't believe in, but they're real, and they're coming. And so mobility management figures all that out and gives you the data that you need to make decisions. One of the things, every time Frank wants to do something in St. Lawrence County, guess where he has to go? He has to go to the Board of Legislators. They can't do anything without the approval, so you still sit in the decision-maker's seat.
So if the end game is to have this system in Jefferson County also, will there be interconnectivity between the three counties? Or will it be a silo?
No, it has to be, I think.
How do the mechanics work of sharing that?
Typically
ridership?
what happens is you find a great place to exchange folks, a bus stop place, in a town either on one side of the county border or the other. Walmarts, heavy shopping plazas where people are going to go anywhere. There's employment stops there. There's shelter for folks that's free, so you don't have to maintain snow removal and other things like that. All that stuff, the mobility manager works with each county government to get that figured out. Like what's going on from Lewis County, bringing people into JCC, has slowly grown over time. It started out pretty slow, but it's been growing. And so you let those things continue, and then you just come up with the best spot. And if Gouverneur is a great spot for St. Lawrence County, then great. If it's further down in Philly, then you do it there.
But it won't be. This is our bus, so.
No, it's all
all
federal and state funding. So why would we treat it that way?
Yep. Okay. Thanks. Yep. Any other questions, Anthony?
So, if I heard you right, the colleges just came on recently, so that's not really a true number with the 75,000. Is that correct? Have they been on a full year in that number?
SUNY Potsdam's been on for a couple of years. Clarkson, for 2019, that would be all the colleges in those numbers of 75,000. But starting in January 1st or 2nd of 2020, we've doubled the service hours. So we're anticipating that we're going to see an increase from that $75,000 or 75,000 rides for 2020, because we basically doubled the hours of operation for the three colleges. But I'm anticipating we go from 75,000 to 83 to 85,000 for 2020.
How long has this been the public transportation? A couple of years?
No, St. Lawrence County's had public transportation.
Well, to this extent is where you're at now. I mean, have they always had this many buses running?
No, we've expanded since 2017. The college connectors were new routes. Ogdensburg's a new route. And as soon as we get approval from New York State Department of Transportation, we've developed an intra-village shuttle for Messina, hitting also Akwesasne, because we have 25 to 40 students that are driving every day to SUNY Potsdam and SUNY Canton that are getting an education there, because of the winters and everything, we want to try to get that access going. We also incorporated any college student that goes to SUNY Potsdam, Clarkson, or SUNY Canton can ride any public transit bus for free because the college subsidizes that fare. So we got a new route. We should see an increase. We're anticipating 83 to 85,000 rides.
Yeah, I guess the only thing I'm thinking is it's a new business, so there's obviously growth that has to be done. So it's kind of a low number now, but it's obviously going to change. The city of Watertown on their routes, I don't know if they've grown, if anybody has any data. I know we have city buses. Has the ridership grown over the years? Are you seeing an increase yearly on that, or it's flat? But once they expand into the rest of the community, there's a chance that that would increase also. So there's...
start by looking at some of those routes and figuring out, are we really going to the right places? So you have to keep all those things in mind, but you're right, it's a huge growth that needs to happen.
I think it's important too, businesses looking for help. That's the biggest downfall with a lot of the employees is distance to their job, and the only way they got there is to walk. So it really does affect businesses also. So I think there's a big potential for growth in the community, especially getting outside the city from where we're at now. But it would be interesting to see. Obviously, you've grown up in St. Lawrence County, and I think the potential is very possible here. But
I would encourage everyone to go to the MPO website and take a look at the transit study that is there. It's not what has to happen, but it's what could happen. So you could very easily see what the vision of the folks who put the plan together, what could be for our county, what they thought some of the priorities were based on who they talked to. And I think that would be helpful to you, just to gain an idea of how big the system could grow, or it's a 5-phase project that they suggest. Maybe we only go to phase 1. We just have to be open to the possibilities.
is there any information out there? I mean, will these be going to Fort Drum, out of Fort Drum to other places in the community for people that may or may not have transportation there?
So regardless of how we move forward, I've been working with Pat and the city, and one of their priorities is to get a route to Fort Drum and another out to the BOCES area, maybe including some of those housing areas or the shopping plazas there. So I hope I'm not talking out of turn, but we're planning for that. And so we've talked to folks at Fort Drum, and we just need to get all of our ducks in a row, and hopefully within the next 12 to 18 months you'll see those routes pop up.
One caveat I'll add to the study there: don't trust the figures that they put in the study. They, that everything else is pretty good content, but I do not trust the financial figures that the planner came up with. I think the professionals here would also agree to that we can do things a lot more efficiently and inexpensive than what their projections were within that study. So, because I know that you'll look and I know you'll complain. So.
Any other questions?
He's right. I will.
Boy, do we know it. So, yeah, any other questions for these folks? Jennifer, thank you for the well-done PowerPoint and the presentation. It's a great meeting tonight. Sam and Frank, thank you for participating. All good discussion, and we appreciate your time. Thank you. What do you got, Dave? He's Anthony. Anthony, you had a perfect opportunity to get back at your brother for everything he's done to you, and you could have just made him sweat up there. And you... Okay, get on with the resolutions.
First resolution this evening is authorizing agreement and amending the 2020 county budget and capital plan in relation to the fiscal year 19 New York State Inoperable Communications Targeted Grant.
May I have a motion, please? Mr. Maxon, Mr. Doldo. Discussion? All in favor, aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Amending the 2020 county budget and capital plan in relation to Lake Ontario flooding.
May I have a motion, please? Mr. Cantwell, Mr. McBride. Discussion? All in favor, aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Third resolution this evening is authorizing agreement with Ontario County Youth Care Facility for the provision of non-secure detention services.
The motion, please. Mr. Doldo, Ms. Grant, discussion. All in favor, aye? Oh, we have a discussion.
I was just wondering, how many times a year approximately would we use a service like this?
It probably varies from year to year, and I'll ask Christine, but it's a backup to the children's home. So that's always been required, and we at one point had another location, and it simply wasn't working out very well. So we, through Christine and her staff, went shopping around, and this is a new location. When we need it, but it's not an everyday thing. Do you have any response, Christine?
No, I mean, our primary contract is with the children's home non-secure. However, quite often we can't use that. There'd be a couple scenarios. I'll have two co-offenders that it would not behoove me to keep them in the same place. They both end up getting kicked out. That's common. And unfortunately, it's located in Jefferson County. I mean, the kid's from Watertown, so it's non-secure. So it's quite likely they might run. So I use two other facilities. I use one in Utica. Haven't been maybe quite so happy with their results. Used to use one in Bath, New York. It's like literally going in the middle of nowhere. No one ever ran from there. However, and it's 3 hours away. However, they no longer are using any out of county. I do use one. I have used now straight for 31 days outside of Syracuse, but that is an $850 a day cost. Last year, I paid that agency $44,000 for one juvenile that I could not house locally. That tore up our budget at the end. So I needed a backup plan, and this, after shopping around and talking to every other director and looking at other facilities, became recommended. So it's hard to say. I don't want to jinx myself, but as of yesterday, I have not had a use of non-secure. Looks like one tonight now that I said that. But we have had several all year long, so it's just kind of, if we can't put someone locally. But we definitely try, first and foremost, to put them at the children's home. Is that answer your question? Oh, it's a pretty good rate. Believe me. And in Jefferson County, I'm sure you know this, we pay $18,000 a year up front just to hold a vet. And then we pay that same rate per day. So I thought it was an excellent rate. And my other backup is Utica, your House of Good Shepherd, and I'm paying them roughly $350, $375 a day. So it was comparable. It definitely beats the $850 a day I paid Still Valley, and that's in Tullia.
Thank you for that explanation. Appreciate it. Any further discussion? All in favor, aye? Opposed? Motion carries.
Next is amending the 2020 county budget in regards to replacing commercial washers in the sheriff's department.
May I have a motion, please? Mr. Barrett? Mr. Cantwell? Discussion. Mr. Ferris?
The money for outboarding has gone down quite a bit because we don't need it anymore. But I don't think we should be using money from outboarding to do this. I'm going to vote for you, but I'd like to take a stronger look at it on the budget this year. It's not really set up as a slush fund. It was set up as more of an overrunning that we had at the county for the longest time. So it shouldn't be just, hey, let's take some money here, let's take some money there, let's buy a car. I think it should be more thought out in the future.
A very valid point, Bobby, but in terms of that particular line item, we've been ratcheting it back every year as the experience has gotten better. And at one point in time, not that long ago, I think everybody can recall that we were getting monthly reports from Chris Spencer because we were outboarding so much. We have cut it back. It doesn't mean we're not going to end up outboarding at any particular time, especially as it relates to female population. So we have monitored it, but we are bringing it down, and kind of for that reason that we don't, but to the extent we don't use it, then what's left falls to fund balance. So it's not that we just willy-nilly charge that account. We monitor it closely. But at the end of every year, or at the budget time every year, we bring that forward, and as you will see, historically, it's been going down.
Very good. Further discussion? All in favor, aye? Opposed? Motion carries.
Amending 2020 county budget to reappropriate state and municipal facilities grant funds relative to the sheriff's department.
May I have a motion, please? Mr. Doldo, Mr. Ferris, discussion. Mr. Maxon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have opined in years past about my opposition to the use of tasers, and I will spare you my speech this year.
It's all good.
Thanks.
All good. Further discussion?
That observation is for the last resolution, Jeremiah. This is the second to the last resolution. You are correct about tasers, but that's the very last resolution.
We can just change it. Record.
I must have gotten ahead of myself. Well, let me flip back then. You're right. Let me see. Maybe we'll vote no on this one too. Oh no, evidence ban.
Evidence ban?
We're good. Thank you, Bob.
We're good on the evidence ban? Good.
For now.
That's all right. Any further discussion? All in favor, aye? Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay, here we go. Authorizing intermunicipal agreement with the City of Watertown regarding fiscal year 2019 Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistance Program and amending the 2020 county budget in relation thereto.
May I have a motion, please? Mr. Cantwell, Mr. Ferris. Discussion? Fast forward the comment. Further discussion? All in favor, aye? Opposed? One opposed. Okay, that's, motion carries. That's the end of the resolutions for this month. We have the last official Bureau of Weights and Measures report from Mr. Richmere on to retirement, cooking Tory dinner, doing laundry, kind of thing. So, along that same vein, we really appreciated his work, especially as Legislator Dodo had mentioned before, spearheading the bi-county, the two-county endeavor. It should be an example of how governments work together. So we appreciate Mr. Richmere's service. I also at this time would like to introduce the new Director of Weights and Measures, Brian Mooney. Brian, anything you'd like to say? Get right after, is there a store that you got to go to first? Mr. Doldo?
Thank you. It's nice to see, you want to call it, since I've been on the board, a third generation coming up that's got some big shoes to fill, but Brian's learned from Jim, Jim's learned from Keith. Yes. And they've all been very respectful to business and understand, what a lot of us go through. And so when he takes his lunch hour break, he will be at the store because I found out he likes to cook. And he does cook up in Lewis County. So it'd be much appreciated if you see his vehicle over there for an hour. He's on his lunch break, but he'll probably be right behind the fryers. But no, congratulations, and I think Jefferson County will be well represented again. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. Anything else to come before the committee? Thank you to department heads for coming to the meeting. Is there anything else to come before the committee? Mr. Maxon.
Thanks. I finally told Bobby, but just for the record, page 51 of the budget, the department requested $335,000 for outboarding. The budget officer recommended $150,000, and now we're reappropriating 10% of it for other uses. So budget season, when it comes in at $500,000 again, we'll remember. We'll remember.
Exactly. Because we didn't build another pod. Mr. Doldo, did you have something?
Any numbers from the airport this month? Or
That's an excellent question, but no, we've not seen any.
Okay.
December was up dramatically. January was up as well. I don't think, we haven't seen any February numbers.
Okay.
We'll have to get on that.
Yeah.
Just curious where we were at.
Yeah. So I will indicate having reference to the airport. He's not here tonight because he's wearing his hat as the association president and tomorrow is the lobbying day for NIAMA in Albany, so that's why he's not with us. But I suspect, to some extent, those duties have probably gotten him caught up in other things.
We'll get those right
But
out.
we'll, yes, we will, yeah.
Yep, actually, January, as we recall, was record-setting for us, so good deal. All right, anything else? Motion to adjourn? Mr. McBride, Ms. Legislator Grant, thank you.